Recently, I made a video in which I asked viewers what class they would like to see me play, whether it be for free-to-play or a higher resonance player. Now, there's actually change coming, and it's going to affect the ability to do this. For what it's worth, Barb actually won both categories, free-to-play and the higher resonance character, and I said to myself, there's no way I'm going the same class on both characters because this is just too much, right? I need a little variety, especially somebody who enjoys changing classes like myself. However, there's been a change that might affect this, and I can actually pull this off in this situation because I'm actually going to be able to change classes more frequently on both of these. If you haven't heard about it by now, class change is permanently going to be reduced to 24-hour cooldown. So this is very exciting for many players. The comments on this, where this was announced on Reddit, have been primarily favorable, and I agree with that. I think that this is a solid change for the game. This was something that was introduced with the release of Blood Knight not that long ago. And they wanted players to have the ability to change classes, perhaps to Blood Knight or even something else to try. Also have the option to revert once per day. Really allow you to just try many things out, see what you like, continue playing the game on something that you enjoy, and so forth. Now, there's been a few comments that I've seen not only there, but I've had people message me so far at this point as well, saying this isn't necessarily good, right? This may lead to everybody in the clan being a demon hunter in the Shadow War. Well, first of all, I still don't think that everybody being the same class is favorable. You'll still have something like one Crusader in a party that would be beneficial. And there's other classes that offer buffs as well. But just for the sake of time, let's just use that one example there. You will see a large portion of players swap classes, sure. And just repeating something I've shared in another video, for really high resonance players, Necromancer actually out DPSs Demon Hunter, just so everybody's aware of that. I know that this is often forgotten. Demon Hunter is not the top DPS class in the game. Necro is. So we have a lot of factors. Sure, people will transfer classes to Demon Hunter to if they have a competitive match. They'll class change, but if this is a clan that's organized and they structure people to respecing or changing classes, grouping players based on what class they're playing for favorable things like Mastermind, well, if they're putting in that kind of effort, they deserve either to win the Shadow War or to have a really good chance at it, right? So I feel like that should be rewarded. And in fact, your clan, if you're not the ones doing it, could do the same thing. There's nothing preventing you from having your players change classes and do the exact same tactics. So that's an option. I've also had some people say, well, this is going to ruin Battlegrounds. Well, Battlegrounds are kind of already ruined in the opinion of many people, to be honest. And what they mean by this is we're going to see a lot of one class. Well, again, we already see basically only a handful of classes here, not even a handful, really. We see an enormous amount of Necros at all resonance. And then we see some Crusaders based on their resonance if it's favorable for them to be a Crusader, because there are some resonance values that are not favorable for Crusaders. And this has to do with the matchmaking and groups that you get paired into. If you're a really high resonance player, it's not very favorable for you to be a Crusader because you'll be expected to be the carry in that match. And as a Crusader, you're really looking to support, even if you're playing an aggressive or an attack style build. And we'll also see a handful of strong classes like Blood Knight, and these Blood Knights at the moment are very, very strong on whales. Now, I would argue that Necro is still the strongest if you have, say, a Giga Whale. However, Blood Knights that fall just shy of that Giga Whale range actually perform a little bit better, in my opinion. So we'll see dynamics like this. But in general, we could really say that we're only seeing 3 classes, at least in the highest bracket, right? It's very rare to see somebody that's not a Necro, not a Crusader, or not a Blood Knight, and is kind of spamming the Battlegrounds. They do exist, and there are some of them out there, but the vast majority of players are playing one of those 3 classes in the higher bracket if they're an avid PvPer. Now, what I do think will occur in the Battleground is I think that people actually queue less frequently because there won't be such a demand for people to queue when they're on a less than favorable class. Given that we have seasons that are now 10 weeks long, if somebody's experimenting with different classes or they lack essences for it, they'll change classes, they'll farm and do PvE type content, but they'll avoid the Battleground. They may queue the Battleground a handful of times when they get all the essences they're looking for, but if the class isn't really ideal for the meta, you probably won't see many people playing it. In the end of the day, especially in PvP, it's competitive and people want to win. And whether or not they're willing to admit it, most people do care about their win rate. And if it's playing on a class that's going to tank that win rate, well, they'll probably just wait until they're on a more favorable class since the season is so long. So I think that what we'll see is basically people, for example, trying Necro out, queuing a bunch of games when they feel comfortable on Necro with the essences and the playstyle and so forth. And maybe they queue games for a couple hours, for a couple of days, get a whole bunch of rating or a whole bunch of rank. however you want to term it. And then when they change classes to say something like Monk at the moment, which is far less favorable, well, they might avoid the battleground or just do enough matches for the daily if they even feel that the rewards are worth it. Overall, this will lead to less players in the queue and probably is the most detrimental effect of the change going into place that I can think of, because with less players, there will be longer queue times. With longer queue times, the range in which players within the match are composed will be even greater, and we're already experiencing some of the loosest matchmaking we've had ever, and it makes for really poor match quality. So it's unfortunate, but I think this is actually going to continue to make that aspect worse. 3 matches a day, changing class every day, and there'll be people that do that. In fact, I probably will change classes every day and play a different class for a week duration here, now that this is a permanent change, and see where I kind of feel that these classes stack up compared to each other. I do have some essence farming to do on a handful of classes just for some new essences that work in the PvP builds. But in general, I think this would be interesting to do, and hopefully I can get this out in roughly a week's time and just give an overview or a tier list, sort of say, look, I played all these classes in 1 week, and this is where everything stands. The meta really hasn't shifted in this week time frame, and so forth, and hopefully give some good feedback in that regard. Now, you may have other things. Challenge Rift rewards are tied to your class, so again, everybody's competing fairly as the same class in that regard. Dungeon farming, having strength and int set pieces convert to each other. Now, when you class change, actually makes things even easier. You can swap to whatever class you want to farm. If you get a group for the day and you have a composition that's not ideal and you want faster runs, well, have a couple of people swap classes. The following day, you can change to other classes and run with a different party group or whatever it may be. So I actually think this overall is a tremendous benefit, and it allows a lot more flexibility. I think it's great for casual players, great for new players to experience different classes. I think it's actually might even be the best for more serious or, say, hardcore players that have spent time farming essences on multiple classes, because now they can just swap every day and they'll have access to working builds. You know, they don't have to farm these essences. A lot of players, myself included, have full working builds for every class in the game, so I can just swap and do whatever content I want. Sure, I'm missing a few essences here and there, but for the most part, it really doesn't much matter what class I'm on. I can definitely make something viable and play whichever content I want. And over time, more and more people will get to this point. So even if you're not a super active hardcore player, you'll be able to build up to this just by swapping for a day. If you don't get what you want, you can always swap off of it the next day and then go back another time and break up the farming. I think this is really an incredible change. And I hope that a lot of people realize that. You do not have to farm all of your essences in one go. You can play a class for 24 hours and then swap to something else, pick up a little bit here and there, return to it later, and eventually you'll have something that you feel more comfortable with. So let me know how you feel about this change. And like I said, the vast majority of comments so far have been positive, and I'm sure that some people have some negative things, even things that weren't mentioned in this video. But in general, I really have nothing but good things to say, aside from I think that the number of people queuing for Battlegrounds, as I mentioned, will go down, but I think that this number was declining whether this change went in or not. So I think that this was kind of inevitable, and this will kind of just maybe tip the iceberg, so to speak, where people will be queuing even less frequently because they've swapped to another class for a period of time, and now they're just not going to queue at all because they're not playing Necro for that week or whatever it may be, or shorter since the class change is 24 hours. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and have a great day.